Hello and welcome to the Warren City School District Board of Education regular meeting. Today is Tuesday, June the 16th, 2020. The time is 6:05 p.m. We are located in the Administration Building in the Harriet T. Upton Room with live stream available at warrencityschools.org. This meeting is a meeting of the Warren City Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participating via email during the meeting as indicated in agenda item number 11. At this time, would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we'll call the meeting to order, and may we please have the roll call.
Mr. Faulkner?
Here.
Mr. Falley?
Here.
Mrs. Patterson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mrs. Limperos?
B and C as additions in the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. At this time, may I please have a motion to adopt the agenda, and please note replacement page 30, deleted page 31.
So move, Faulkner. Second.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Falley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Limperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Item number 6, the treasurer's report.
I have no report tonight.
Thank you. And then under agenda item 7, the superintendent's report. Go.
If you proceed.
Okay. At this time, if Mr. Fowley would please read
Yes.
A under the superintendent's report.
A resolution of condolence for Betsy Ginecco. It is recommended the resolution listed below, extending the sympathy of the Warren City Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools to the family, friends, and co-workers of Elizabeth Betsy Ginecco, be approved as submitted. Whereas the death of Ms. Ginecco has brought great sadness to the school district and the many people with whom she worked, and whereas Betsy served the district for 30 years. During these years, she taught business education, intensive office education, accounting, and 4th grade. In 1998, Betsy became an elementary principal at Laird Elementary School, and in 2001 made her final move to the Warren City Schools as associate superintendent. Her time here was a gift, not only to the students she taught, but to the employees she mentored. Betsy's retirement letter, sent to all staff members, requested we remember one thing: to always have the sincere goal in our hearts that children are our #1 priority. Her legacy lives on, and her dedication will not be forgotten. Now therefore be it resolved that Board of Education President Patricia Limperos, Vice President Robert Faulkner Sr., Board members John Fowley, Regina Pattison, Julian Walker, Superintendent of Schools Steve Shiro, and Administrative Assistant to the Superintendent Tracy Preston, express their condolences to the family and many friends. Be it further resolved that this message of sympathy be spread across the meetings of this minute.
Second. Okay, call the roll.
Mr. Falley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mrs. Limperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay.
Second, superintendent's report. I asked Mr. Capers, principal of Warren G. Harding High School, to join us. I wanted to take a moment to thank him for his focus in his leadership in working with the students at Warren G. Harding High School, in particularly the seniors in the graduating class of 2020. The decisions we've made along the way may not have been the most popular. They were at times the only decisions that could be made, and the focus of our students, regardless of opinion from time to time, was always and only our only goal. So I'd like to give Mr. Capers the opportunity to say a couple words about that, and also the board to have a couple minutes to share with Mr. Capers, because we pulled off something here in this community that if it was from the organization, the planning, the thought, the structure, the production, which we referenced at our last meeting, if it was the final piece to this at Robbins Theater last week, displaying our graduates. None of it just happened. So, Mr. Capers, any thoughts? And then board, any thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's great. I think it's more so a testament of the community of our district with all the resources sort of being able to come together. Frank, who's here tonight, Mr. Whitaker, there were educational assistants who Mr. Shiro made available to kind of help with the recording of that, to the staff, kind of coming together to really make the commencement at the high school special, and then, the production and everything that went into that on the back end. It did kind of take a lot of time to pull that together, but again, I think it's just more of a testament of having the resources available and people to have the willingness not just to do what they were asked, but to add a little bit of something to truly make it special. From the swag bags for our kids and our families there, to do what we could to make the in-person event special, to the support, the resources available to rent, drive-in, to the fireworks, to just everything that kind of went into that. Again, you mentioned Charlotte was spared no expense. Whatever we needed, it was there. Again, try to make it as special as possible for our kids and our family. And, we wanted to have something that our community could be proud of, recognizing the graduation community event. So we're appreciative of that. Even to be part of the district where when we call upon or text folks, Sean Jones' stature to, without hesitation, to be willing to pitch in and help. And even Stephanie Fisher reaching out, kind of asked maybe her and Dana to do a little something for our alma mater. They contacted back a week later and they had an alumni virtual course.
And our board
was part of that as well. I had no idea, that was going to happen, but just folks who, that's an example of people who didn't just want to be a part of it, but who wanted to do something and really try to make it special for our students and for our community. So it's a testament of what's been done in Warren over the years. It's had an impact on folks, and including to what's currently been done, that people still want to make sure the district's represented in a great light. So it's just good to be part of a great team, as Mr. Faulkner always kind of talks about, and it's kind of thank goodness everything came out. So as a kid, always looking back, wish I would have done this, would have done that, kind of done this, but we were able to kind of be proud of what came together for our district.
Absolutely. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Other than thank you. No.
Yes. I'd say a couple things. First of all, I actually went to the graduation at the drive-in, and a couple of thoughts come to mind. I think you set the standard for a virtual graduation. That was the way to do it. And I referred to it as, we used to have a person in this district used to talk about world class. And that was, some of you may remember him. And it was just world class. And people enjoyed it. And I think it was great that every student, had a chance to come across and just say a few words and went through. That was you were smooth as silk, brother. That was very good. Thank you.
Julian?
Yes, honestly, with everything going on and to pull that together so seamlessly, and I know it wasn't behind the scenes. I can only imagine, juggling 15 balls with one hand. But it like Mr. Faulkner said, and like Mr. Fowley said, in a world class. It's interesting because I was sitting there watching, and I actually watched the whole thing. I've been in live graduations where I fell asleep. I was actually awake for that one. It was, and for every student to be able to express themselves, I think that was awesome. I've seen a couple collegiate graduations, again, that I flipped away from, but that gave everybody their 15 minutes of fame, especially with a bad year. You really took lemons and made lemonade. Kudos.
I just thought it was just great. I really did. As I put in my text message to Superintendent the night of the graduation, it was so student focused that they had to walk away feeling very special, regardless of their situation and the circumstance. You guys made it so special for them. And I was proud. It was a very proud moment for me to see how that went off. And congratulations and an excellent job. Excellent.
And I will just echo what my colleagues have said, and I will add that, that is a highlight. Graduation is a highlight. Being a board member that's one of the big things. And to stand on stage, shake their hands, hug them, congratulate them, see the excitement, feel that excitement. And I have to say, you captured the feels for me on that, and that was a great. As Mr. Walker said, I watched the entire thing. There were moments I laughed, I cried, I was just, and thank you. And I know it was a lot of time away from your family, but thank you so much.
Yes.
Excellent job.
You mentioned one other thing to it that I think is very interesting in terms of the community. Downtown with the Robbins Theater, the idea of having all of our kids, I coming back through town, I saw those are our students, going across the stage,
beautiful.
and the fact how clear the pictures were. When sometimes you have a mass thing like that, it's all, it's kind of, but these things are just crystal clear. Every picture went through there. And so it just talks about, as you said, the support the community has. And so I could say we could not have, that was the way to do it.
Thanks. That's another example of something we've never done, the photos, the official photos.
Yeah.
of the graduates.
Right.
So we were able to do that.
Yeah.
Again, maybe expenses available to be able to do that. That was not cheap to do that, but we were able to get each kid a picture. And then importantly for that, the photographer shared the digital file. Initially, they weren't going to do, but they shared the digital file, so we were able to get high quality photos.
Amazing.
So again, just an opportunity to be able to kind of spend for our kids to have that, then morphed into something really nice and on the theater. Because had we not got approval to spend money on that, we wouldn't have had those files to share with them. So.
I was at an open house, a students' open house this past weekend, and it was brought up about the Harding graduates' pictures at the Robbins Theater. Yeah, and I was proud. Yeah.
And that's another
Very
testament
good.
of the community's support that we receive, with community sponsors and the Robbins Theater, wanting to do that. And, just like a number of donations came in to fund the fireworks display, and stuff like that, from a handful of groups, organizations, clubs, businesses that wanted to know what they could do special. And no one anywhere in our community with any thought we had said no. If it was the officers that helped work under Sergeant Parana's supervision the evening of the event, or supporting us along the way, or Bob Pintite, the health department, everyone has been on board with trying to do whatever we could do to make this special. And again, what we've shared with the board and can also share publicly, we understand when we made the announcement that our event was going to be virtual, and we could not communicate what our plans were because it took weeks to get commitments from every aspect, including the Elm Road Drive-In was something that we couldn't get approved to do. We were in conversation, we were in dialogue, we were in agreement, but until theaters were open,
Right.
we can't say we're going to have it here and then have more disappointment. The fireworks, same thing, unannounced, and kept it on, as low as we could because of so many factors. And we realized that our children, our seniors, had a lot of disappointment along the way, and we didn't want to contribute anymore. So it may have made adults a little upset along the way. We're good with that, as we say, because this was about the students.
kids, yeah.
This was about the
Yes, it
students,
was. Yes,
and
it
that
was.
was how it was planned and intended. And again, thank you for your focus. We had a plan. Well, we had multiple plans. I guess I could say now that it's over. I was, and Mr. Capers knows this, I was devastated with the idea of not being able to have graduation at the stadium. That was the horse I was pulling for the whole time. That was the vision. That's what we were thinking. If things develop, we can do this. It just wasn't permissible.
Right.
And that was going to be, and it would be good to go and do something we've done many years before. but that became a non-reality due to the guidelines that we were required to follow. So congratulations for pulling off the event. Thank you, and you are representative of a team, as you said, educational assistants, secretaries, administrators, teachers, maintenance, security officials. You're representative of the team, given the fact that we have only 10 people in this room today. But thank you on behalf of the work that everyone has done.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you. Good job.
Okay, I have two other reports. One is going to be a general bits of information that would be partly communications, but also expanding with the board on what information across the district. I sent an extensive weekly update to the board. If you've had the opportunity to review that, there's lots of information. Also, Mr. Capers just made his exit as Mr. Nicholson's coming in for a future report. But if you noticed, the Castle sound bites, I sent via email and also a hard copy. The Castle sound bites. This is a national publication in our work with social emotional learning and equity through our group in Chicago, and 3 districts across the nation were featured in their work. I believe it was Dallas, I believe it was Cleveland, and then Warren City Schools. I want to share this with you not just for Karen's cover page message as far as Castle as an organization, where they are and where they're going, but also some of the things, including Harding's graduation was featured nationally on Castle Soundbites. So I wanted to share that with you as well, and that was part of the weekly update. Another message to the board and to families. Families are starting to receive SNAP benefits through the mail. And so families that currently receive SNAP benefits, there's just about, not an exact dollar amount, close to $300 that's been added to the SNAP benefit accounts. This is a program funded not locally, but statewide. And families, I believe, who do not qualify for SNAP benefits, if their child was enrolled in Warren City Schools, not sure if it's poverty driven or not, but we're receiving SNAP benefit cards in the mail starting today, maybe yesterday. So I got
I wonder if that's because of
calls.
because we're 100%.
Yeah, because of our community
we're
option
free lunch, yeah.
of being 100%. So families that would not necessarily receive those benefits have been receiving them. I've been getting calls. And I also saw it was on Spectrum News this afternoon when I was watching the governor's comments. So statewide, the mailing for this has begun. And that is to make up the difference for students and children that would normally be receiving their meals during school and to best support those families. Another communication tomorrow between 10 and 12, the Mahoning County Business Advisory Council is going to be doing a drive-through for seniors in Trumbull County. Again, due to our affiliation with Mahoning County ESC, and this is going to be a giveaway for seniors across the county that participated. I know Brookfield and Warren, and then it's open to all seniors across the county. So that'll be at Harding High School between 10 and 12. Also on Thursday, this Thursday, we're going to be doing our second giveaway for the second Harvest Food Bank. We're going to be making an announcement tomorrow. I know it's already out in the media and social media, but we will be doing that, and all vehicles will have to follow the same procedures, hopefully with the support of the National Guard, and the only entrance that will be available is the Laird Avenue entrance, and folks will be guided into Warren G. Harding High School parking lot. People need to stay in their vehicles, and those food items will be put directly in the trunk. And so there is 2 other dates planned, I believe one for July and one for August at this time. So it's the second of 4 events in partnership with Second Harvest Food Bank, that, by the way, has been a great partner with the Warren City Schools over the last several years. Lunch counts. You know, our lunches, we've been giving approximately 1,200 to 1,300 lunches daily, and we've seen that number increase over the last week. So our food service department has been doing that. We're also doing weekend feedings, which is given out on Fridays. So our count is approximately 1,250. So I put between 1,200 and 1,300 because it does fluctuate based upon day of the week as well. Inspiring Minds. We have continued working as Warren City Schools, an Inspiring Minds program, in hopes of having an Inspiring Minds program in the schools in the grades 3 through 8. It's a goal. We're hoping to make it happen. But I have to be clear, schools in Ohio remain closed to children unless directed otherwise. That includes camps, that includes everything. When I say unless otherwise, Mr. Nicholson's going to talk about the reopening of sports. We have been given the blessing to do in-person small graduations, which we did to support our virtual. Fall sports, been able to do the phase 1, 2, 3. We're in phase 2 at this time, I believe.
We're in phase 2 for football.
And so that's been going on for 2 weeks. And we have different sports: swim, basketball, soccer, etc. Last week, I inquired about marching band, flag line, majorettes, and was told a hard no by the health department. It's not been brought to the table at that time by OHSAA, etc. That has since changed in the last few days, that we're able to do flag line, majorette tryouts, and marching band. However, all of these programs have to follow social distancing of no more than 10 in a group as they phase through. So the guidance is going to be forthcoming for marching band. So we don't have a plan in place for marching band because it hasn't been submitted yet into approvable detail, and that usually hits in July. But marching band is going to be one of the areas that's going to be the most challenging. And we could talk about some of the return to school things that seems like it's going to be coming out. And we could talk about that. But back to Inspiring Minds. We're hoping that this order that schools are closed to children, and I'm being very specific, will be lifted so that we could have an Inspiring Minds program. If it's not lifted, there will be no program. If it's lifted, we need a week or two to hammer out the final details, because we have to get the order of what we can do before we could say what we're going to do.
Right.
So we need to wait for the order. Governor DeWine had mentioned today, in the next couple weeks, he's going to look at providing more guidance about schools. Again, he's governing a state. Schools is one entity of it. So I don't anticipate, and I emailed Derek after that announcement, still following it very closely. Could come soon, could come later. You never know which announcement's coming on a day. So again, we're hoping to be able to have a 3, hopefully a 4-week Inspiring Minds program. But until restrictions are lifted, shifted, or changed, it's just in the planning phases. And I want everyone to be aware of that. And the governor has to declare schools open for children, other than the exceptions. The next issue that impacts football, Inspiring Minds, band, all of our programs. Transportation is an extension of the school. There is no school transportation. Your buses are shut down other than delivering lunches around the community. Children are not permitted on buses. There's been no guidance on how to transport children on a bus. And so at this point, even if there was guidance given on expansion of camps programs for kids, the transportation has to follow in suit or in like. Now, I believe I'm going to get some more information on transportation tomorrow. Again, following updates. The superintendents have been are meeting often. We're meeting with health officials locally and otherwise. And so when that information comes available, we'll continue to work through those appropriate advisors on guidance and opening. So again, what's holding us up on Inspiring Minds? Schools remain closed to children, and we have no means for transporting students. I met with Coach Arnold last week and explained, make sure you're not making plans to travel, scrimmage, etc. First, there's no competition permitted. Secondly, you don't have a means to get there. Yeah. Until guidance is provided, it's shut down. And it's not just a Warren City Schools thing, it's statewide. Again, when we had a conversation with legal counsel, public transportation's up, WRTA's up, these things are up under certain guidelines and restrictions. But a school bus is an extension of the school. And it's been specific. It's not just how we're interpreting it. Plain and simple. That's how it's laying out. Lastly, return to school. We have been monitoring this the whole way along. I don't anticipate any kind of plan being announced as far as the means where we're moving through in the Warren City Schools for next year until the 3rd or 4th week of July. That'll give families approximately 3 to 4 weeks to know what school is anticipated to look like. We are having no secret about it. We are planning multiple ways of doing it. just like we did with graduation. Plan A, school opens. That would mean restrictions have been lifted, conditions have changed, guidance is no longer requiring otherwise, and maybe there's a vaccine, whatever the case may be. Business as usual, plan A. Plan B, things flare up and there's a school closure extended. Both of those things are kind of out of our, out of our control as far as directions given, we respond. Directions given, we respond. The third is in the guidance documents coming out that students have to maintain social distancing, capacity is at approximately 50%, and we have to figure out how we deliver instruction. If it is through a half-day model, or if it's through a modified schedule of 2 days a week, etc. We have plans for all of those. Our schedules are done for all of those. Our staffing is done for all those. All those plans are all in place. We just need to know when. Professional development for staff has been ongoing already in June. We're going to continue, especially diving in on technology in the months of July, in the beginning of August with staff, and continuing that information. I'll say warning, but my caution to everyone out there is, here's a guidance document. I get these all the time, draft watermarked across it. Depending on who publishes the document is from what angle the information is coming. One document said you need to modify your buses to put plexiglass shields in. Sounds like a good plan, right? But the State Highway Patrol won't certify a bus that's modified. So it's great, you can modify a bus, but you can't put it on a road. So,
It's not funny.
you have a document on one hand that's saying, masks will be required. You have other guidance saying they're not going to be required. Temperature needs to be taken upon entry. Temperature needs to be taken at home before leaving the house. So all of this has to pan out. The best I can tell you is from what we're hearing, there's going to be few requirements from the Ohio Department of Health and supported and interpreted by the local health departments. And there's going to be guidance, recommendations, and suggestions from the Ohio Department of Education. And we're all going to have to figure it out once those are handed down. Is there any questions? Because, again, I'm not going to commit to anything happening or not happening, because without having the guidance, I don't see where an informed decision can be made. Just preparing for all contingencies, which has kind of been the world we've been living in.
Right.
Any questions?
Unless you have a
Because if I can't answer, I'll just won't. What was it?
Unless you have a vaccine date, no.
I do not, but I wish there was. I wish there was.
Right.
As there are no answers, I guess we have no questions.
Well, in the words you all love to hear, that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
Yes, we love those words. Okay. Well, thank you. All right.
Something to change tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
No, and it will. And it will.
And I can say I was literally on a call with health officials
Okay.
who jumped on the call with the superintendents and told us something, and then had to take another call and jump back onto our call 30 minutes later, because what they told us at 9 o'clock was now different after their call at 10 o'clock.
That's right.
And in the same call, it went 180.
Well, I guess what we can
Because the way it's
say,
handed down.
we appreciate your leadership and your flexibility. Because constantly changing and having alternate plans in place and trying to be patient as questions are coming in, from groups. So thank you very much. All right, let's move on to item number 8, the Board of Education Committee reports. Under athletics, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Nicholson.
Okay, one of the things I wanted to go over is, the governor allowed us to start some skills and conditioning for low contact type of sports, effective on the 26th of May. It was announced on Thursday, as Memorial Day weekend, it started the Tuesday after it. We started football on June 1st. What we didn't want to jump into this. We wanted to make sure that we had our resources, our disinfectants, our sprays, our thermometers. You know, we want to thank the maintenance department for providing us with all the supplies and things that we needed. We needed action plans from our coaches. And Coach Arnold was we first got pretty much a very detailed report that was reviewed by Mr. Shire and myself. Mr. Lacey sent back for a few modifications and finally got the approval. So our football started back on June 1. And they entered what we call Phase 1. Phase 1 is 14 days of practice under these guidelines. You know, you're going to have screenings at the beginning of each practice. Temperature screenings that are documented, health questions that the kids, do you have sore throat? Have you been near anybody that's had COVID, etc. So all that starts off their practices every day. It's recorded on a log. We keep the logs. One of the things about Phase 1, no more than 10 people such as this in a workout session. So we had 10 people in the stadium. We had 10 people in the weightlifting room in the varsity house. We had 10 people on the upper track. So what he did was he had an early practice and a later practice. So we had to go to multiple groups. That was how we could run an effective practice for now. After 14 days, which
You meant skill training and conditioning.
skill training and conditioning, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, one of the weightlifting is considered conditioning.
Right, but not a practice. Skill training
No
and conditioning.
footballs, yeah, I used the wrong word. Yeah, no footballs, no contact, skills and conditioning.
And the coaches are also having temperatures checked.
They are-
And they're going through those questionnaires as well, okay.
They record on the log, they're on there also. They're required to wear a mask, as the kids are when they're inside the varsity house. Outside, it's a little more lenient on the masks. We hit the 14-day mark. We moved to Phase 2 in football effective yesterday. What does Phase 2 mean? It basically means now that the groups can go up to, outside groups can go up to 50 now, from 10. So we're in Phase 2 for football. Stopped by last night. We had 25 kids out on the field, and then the others are still broken down into some smaller groups. So we know how now the ability, if we want to, we can get 50 kids in the stadium, and you got to keep your social distancing and still continue to practice all the things that were in Phase 1. Our other sports started a week after football. They're still in Phase 1, and they've got this is the start of their second week. Soccer, boys basketball, girls basketball. So they're a week behind from football. So they'll be released to Phase 2 hopefully, as long as we don't see any cases or increases in the temperatures and stuff. And they can move on to Phase 2. There's 3 phases of this. When you get to Phase 3, eventually after another 14 days, the one thing I noticed is under pre-workout contact screening, where we're doing thermometer checks and health questions, any person who has had a fever or cold symptoms in the previous 24 hours should not be allowed to take part in the workouts and should contact his or her medical provider. A record should be kept of all individual presence. All individuals present. So what it's going to do is kind of it's going to take away the thermometer reporting and testing. And so it's kind of a release from that. One of the key things it says here, we're not directly participating in practices or workouts. Care should be taken to maintain a minimum distance of 3 to 6 feet. So it seems like all of a sudden the 6 foot now is going to 3 feet. So that's kind of the 3 phases.
That's Phase 3?
That's Phase 3. And there's facilities cleaning, physical activity, athletic equipment, how you clean things, how you do things. The first phase, no locker room facilities. Eventually, it will break back by Phase 3, getting into the locker rooms and things of that nature.
Is there still a 50-person limit in Phase 3?
It's 50, yeah, 50 people, and that's challenging football because you're sitting at 70 to 75 football players. Obviously, you can't bring them all out. So, most likely Coach Arnold will look at, maybe run the first team offense against the second team defense, vice versa on the upper field. So we can go, say, 35 and 35, 2 different sites. So that's what the game plan is. I know you're talking about band a little bit ago, Mr. Shire. I had a conversation with Mr. Young today, just kind of finding out what's going on with band, because I got other athletic directors that will inquire about what you're still doing with band. So one of the concerns with band, obviously, is phase 3 talks about 50. When you're talking 175 in a band, you know, that's why, like Mr. Shire was saying, we gotta just stay patient, see what the state's coming up from day to day, how it changes, and, you know, once we finally get a decision, you know, we'll make it happen. So that's where we're at with sports. I want to tell you, I'm very impressed with what my coaches have done. I told them, you know, this needs to be done. They took the bull by the horns. They've done it very well. I went to soccer last night up at Lincoln School. And as you enter Lincoln, it's an arrow drive. You got the soccer field, used to be a football field to the left, and then the field behind the church. We're utilizing that so we can get 20 people in a practice. Kevin is meeting Coach Brown, or Coach is meeting the children or the parents at Carside. They don't even get out. He scans them. It's recorded. If they pass, they'll drop them off. Car exits. So he's done it. I'd like his system, and I think the logistics of how Lincoln's laid out really help his area make it easy for him. So very happy with the coaches. Coach Caputo got his girls in tonight for the first time. I watched him, and he had a nice setup, and I just think they're doing a great job. It's challenging, but I think they're making it work. All right, and then a few other things. Obviously, the softball field had a sod day last week. If you've driven by there, wow, they're putting up gates today.
Looks like it always belonged there.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
someone said something about, are we watering the field? And I was told that the sprinklers are programmed to run at night. We're going to do it at night at school.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
tennis courts, waiting 25 days for the coating to cure, poster up, everything. I was up there last night, need some fencing, and then once the thing is cured, they'll put the final color green on it. So, and as Mr. Shire was saying, my department, we get calls every day. I go on Zoom meetings with Northeast District athletic directors from all around this part of the state, and we're all the same boat. We're coming up with, okay, what happens? Scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. Just that we have an idea that when we finally announce what we can do, that we have to jump in and get it done. So a lot of pre-planning, and that's where we're at.
Very good. And thank you, again for your flexibility, leadership, reaching out, networking, because that's huge. Finding out what other districts are doing, best practices, borrowing those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I gotta
crazy
do-
times, but maybe that's kind of the little glimmer of hope there is everyone's working together to do what they need to do for the students. So thank you. Okay, financial advisory, nothing. Board policies and guidelines. We have,
policies that we will be voting on this evening.
okay. Legislative, I don't have anything. Regina, do you have anything you want to add?
Just want to thank Steve for the updates and keeping us informed about what's going on down in Columbus.
And TCTC.
We're waiting on everybody else,
Yeah,
and a lot of things going with that too. When you got that
And
many
you did not
districts.
do a graduation this
No,
year, correct?
no.
Everyone just did their own
Home thing.
homeschool graduation, okay. All right, anything under old business?
Would you like me to address the Willard project?
Sure, if you want to do that, yeah.
Okay,
If
really.
you have something.
Yeah, very, very simple. Just want to give you an update because we had taken action on that at a previous meeting that the project is underway. It is ongoing. Mr. Lacey and Gazelle are going to be meeting tomorrow. They're going to be reviewing Willard project documents related back to the construction, inspections and stuff like that, just to see, the history. One of the things that I did share with Mr. Lacey is you are the 5th business manager since the project started, and I don't even want to start counting superintendents, but I think I'm at least 5.
6.
But who's counting? So again, we, at least there's only 2 treasurers, and the treasurer was here during the project.
And yeah, you
So
were,
see
and you
how
were
this
here.
works? So
You were in-house.
yes. So we are doing that. I think the good thing is, having been here for a while,
Yeah.
I've been able to point, to different pockets of information, files, et cetera, because again, you go from business managers, business office, treasurer's office, so Mr. Caputo was here in some level of alignment with the projects during that phase of it, and trying to, as well as the superintendent's office, because the superintendent that was here for several years was here getting those projects, those buildings up and going.
Yes.
So, we haven't found documents yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if we do, because of her involvement with the projects.
Yeah.
So again, going through all those phases. So that'll be tomorrow, that they're going to meet and have discussion on that.
Good.
And
See, you also got to remember that while we're talking about the internal changes, just think of all the changes that was happening in Columbus. OSFC had 2 or 3 different iterations of that, different
Yes.
groups. So they've had the same kind of different directors and all that. So it's a whole barrage of
Exactly. So Mr. Lacy will provide further information and advisement as it becomes available and updates on the project as it progresses. Not sure if it'll be in a communication form, or if it will be just some update at the June 30th board meeting. And along those lines with the June 30th board meeting, I did ask to be excused from that meeting, potentially. So if I am excused from that meeting, Mrs. Hartzell is going to sit in my place for that meeting. But again, I can be available, electronically on FaceTime, Zoom, or whatever. So that's all I have for the Willard update
Well, thank you.
under old business.
Thank you. Okay, anything under new business? All right, let's move along then. Under Treasurer's Recommendations, on page 4, item 1, Mr. Faulkner, please.
Yes. Minutes is recommended a resolution listed below regarding the May 2020 board meetings be approved as submitted.
Okay, questions, comments, concerns? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson? Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 5, item 2, Mr. Walker, please.
Monthly financial statement. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding the May 2020 financial statement and short-term investments made by the treasurer during May 2020, Exhibit A, be approved as submitted.
Second.
Okay, questions, comments? Go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. We'll move to page 7, item 3, Mrs. Patterson, please.
2019-2020 co-curricular budget and purpose statements. It is recommended the resolution listed below establishing 2019-2020 co-curricular budget and purpose statements be approved as submitted.
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 8, item 4, Mr. Fowley, please.
To maintain employment and compensation of employees, contracted service providers, and consultants for the remainder of the fiscal year 2020 to support continued operations. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding maintaining employment and compensation of employees, contracted service providers, and consultants for the remainder of the fiscal year 2020 to support the continued operations be approved as submitted.
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Moving on to Superintendent's Recommendations on page 10, item 1, Mr. Faulkner, please.
Agreements, contracts, and/or leases is recommended a resolution listed below entering to agreements, contract, and/or leases in number A be approved as submitted, and you have it listed there.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments on this? Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 11, item 2, Mr. Walker, please.
Ohio Department of Education certification for Ohio Teachers Evaluation System and Ohio Principal Evaluation System. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding the Ohio Department of Education certification for credentialed Ohio Teachers Evaluation System and Ohio Principals Evaluation. Evaluators be approved as submitted.
Okay, any questions? Go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 12, item 3, Mrs. Patterson, please.
Board policies, the second reading. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding the adoption of board policies A through K, second reading, be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any questions or comments on any of these? Okay, go ahead and please call the roll.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. And on page 14, item 4, Mr. Fowler, please.
Authorization for disposal of board-owned fixed assets for the period January 2020 through June 2020. It is recommended the resolution authorizing disposal of board-owned fixed assets for the period June 2020 through June 2020 be approved as submitted.
I'd second.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 15, item 5, Mr. Faulkner, please.
The salary tables is recommended the resolution listed below adopting said salary tables be approved as submitted with the changes as indicated. This involves a revised salary table D, which is custodial and operational employees, effective June the 30th, and then the other one is revised salary table L, which is classified non-supervisory and grant fund schedules. That's effective from July 20 to June 2022.
Second.
Okay, I have a question. Should that read June 30th of 2020 on the first bullet? No? Okay. Okay.
The contract runs from June 30th, 2018.
Okay.
I believe there was an error in the salary table that was printed
Okay.
and distributed. That's my
That's correct.
understanding.
Okay.
And so.
So it's a
it is-
correction.
It is, and I'm not sure what year that there was, and I'm sure it was a typo. But whatever the case is, it has been corrected.
Okay.
But if that was the year the contract went through was 18 through 21.
Gotcha, okay. Anyone else?
Same thing with salary table L.
The salary table L, this is the classified in non-bargaining employees as well as grant-funded employees. Their contract period runs the same as the teachers and the secretaries. And so this is revised with changes as indicated in technology
So
in
these
the
line
IT
up now.
department.
They line up now.
Yeah, they were lined up. The salary table L went through already. We've been working on our IT department and some shifts and changes of responsibilities and job descriptions for over a year. I asked for that to be reviewed by Mr. Wasser when he was here and Mrs. Hartzell, because they have their own parts of where they supervise the levels of tech within the buildings and the IT within the district. And so they've been working with Danielle, our supervisor of technology. They have provided the changes that they want to see as far as responsibilities, job descriptions, and the discrepancies in salary.
Okay. All right, thank you. Go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, and then on page 16, item 6, Mr. Walker, please.
Tuition reimbursement, it is recommended the resolution listed below for tuition reimbursement be approved as submitted.
Any questions about this? Go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 17, item 7, Mrs. Patterson, please.
The personnel recommendations. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding personnel items A through H be approved as submitted.
That takes you to page 29. I don't believe we have any retirements or, I didn't see anything earlier, so.
I'd second that.
Okay. She will too. I think we'll be still okay, all right. Okay, all right, so let's go, do we have a second? We have a second, right? Okay, let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mrs. Patterson?
Abstain.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Abstain.
And Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, on page 30, item 8, Mr. Fowley, please.
Personnel recommendations. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding personnel items A be approved as submitted.
Second.
Questions or comments? Go ahead and call the roll, please.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. And let's move on to, we don't have anything under associate, nothing under board recommendations. I did not receive any public participation via email requests. There is no need to move into executive session. So at this time, if I may have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, and call the roll, please.
Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes, and the motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Everyone, thank you and have a good evening.